The Green Children of Woolpit. Close your eyes and let your imagination drift back, not just decades or centuries, but nearly 900 years into the past. England in the 12th century. The land is green and fertile, dotted with tiny villages, surrounded by deep woods and winding fields. The people live simple lives, farming the soil and tending to their animals. In the county of Suffolk, there lies a small village called Woolpit. Its name comes from the wolf pits that once lined its borders, deep holes dug into the ground to trap wolves that preyed upon livestock. The people of Woolpit were used to the quiet rhythm of their lives, the toll of the church bell, the sowing of seeds, the gathering of harvests. But one warm summer's day, something happened that would echo across centuries. It began when villagers came upon two children wandering out of the wolf pits themselves, a boy and a girl. At first glance, they looked ordinary enough, no different from other children who might roam barefoot through the fields. Yet, as the villagers drew closer, their mouths fell open in astonishment. For these children had skin of a strange, unearthly shade, green, like the color of fresh spring leaves. The children's clothing was no less peculiar. They wore garments made of a material no one in Woolpit had ever seen before. The fabric shimmered oddly, not quite like wool, not quite like linen. It seemed woven from threads unfamiliar to the villagers' hands. Even stranger, the children did not speak the language of Suffolk. Their voices babbled in an unknown tongue, one that sounded like no dialect from England or from anywhere nearby. The villagers could not understand a single word. Startled and uncertain, the people of Woolpit brought the children into the heart of the village. Though fearful at first, the children seemed gentle, wide-eyed and bewildered. They looked at the villagers as if they too were strangers in a strange land. When offered food, however, the children shrank back. They refused bread, cheese, or meat. They shook their heads, their green faces growing pale with hunger. For days, no one knew how to feed them. But then one villager brought in freshly picked beans, broad beans, still in their pods. At once the children's eyes lit up. They tore open the pods and devoured the beans eagerly. At last the villagers knew what the children could eat. In time, the children were taken into the care of a local landowner, Sir Richard de Calne. His manor was not far from Woolpit, and there the mysterious pair were raised with kindness. Slowly they began to adapt. The boy and girl learned English, though haltingly at first, and their greenish hue faded as they ate other foods besides beans. And when at last they could speak the villagers' tongue, they revealed their astonishing story. The girl explained that she and her brother had come from a land with no sun, a twilight world, always dim and green, where the light was like perpetual evening. The people there were all like them, with green skin and strange speech. They lived underground, she said, in a place she called the Land of St. Martin, where everything was twilight, and a great river separated their world from ours. One day, as the children tended to their father's cattle, they followed the animals into a cave. Inside, they heard the sound of bells ringing in the distance. Church bells, they thought, soft and beckoning. Curious, they followed the sound, winding through darkness until, quite suddenly, they found themselves in the bright sunlight of Woolpit. The dazzling light blinded them, and they stumbled into the pits where the villagers discovered them. When the girl finished her tale, the villagers could only marvel. Where was this twilight land she spoke of? Was it an earthly place, deep beneath the ground, or something far more mysterious? Some whispered that the children had come from another world, one hidden from human eyes.
Others thought they must have wandered from a far-off foreign land, though none could explain their green skin or their strange clothes. As for the two children, their paths diverged. The boy, always weaker, never thrived in his new life. Despite care, he grew sickly and passed away soon after being baptized. The girl, however, grew stronger. In time, she integrated into village life, even working in service at Sir Richard's manor. Her skin lost its green hue, her language grew fluent, and she lived much like any other young woman of Suffolk. Yet she never forgot her strange origins, nor did the villagers forget her story. Long after her passing, the tale of the Green Children of Woolpit was written down by chroniclers of the age. Historians, centuries later, would debate whether it was allegory, folklore, or truth. Some believe the children were malnourished Flemish orphans, their skin tinted green from a poor diet. Others argue that the story is a medieval parable about outsiders integrating into society. Still others wonder if it preserves something far stranger, a folk memory of another world, just beyond our own. And so the tale of the Green Children of Woolpit has endured. To this day, nearly 900 years later, their story continues to capture imaginations. Were they lost travellers from a distant land, or visitors from a place forever hidden, a land of eternal twilight? No one truly knows. As you drift into sleep, let their mystery linger. Imagine the twilight land they spoke of, a quiet green world beneath ours, where the bells still ring faintly in the distance. Perhaps, if you listen closely in dreams, you too may hear them.
The Wild Hunt. On winter nights, when the wind combs the forests like fingers through a harp, villagers say an old procession wakes. Doors are barred, shutters latched, fires banked low. Mothers quiet children, and farmers bring the animals in from the byre. For when the clouds pile high, and the trees creak like masts on a black sea, the countryside listens for distant horns. That is when the wild hunt rides, an ancient cavalcade, older than memory, swift as stormlight, and gone as quickly as a dream at dawn. Those who speak of it never agree on the leader. In the north, some swear it is the one-eyed wanderer, Woden, cloak snapping like a sail. In England, others whisper of Herne the hunter, antlers crowning his brow, hooves striking sparks no rain can quench. In the far west, they name them Coon Anwin, pale hounds from a twilight realm. Wherever the tale is told, there are riders upon shadowed horses, and there are hounds with eyes like embers, their breath bright as frost in moonlight. The hunt is an omen, say the elders, a warning of hard seasons, war, sickness, poor harvests. Some insist it sweeps up wandering spirits, shepherding the restless dead toward a place of quiet. Others claim the riders are not cruel, only heedless. To look directly at them is to be noticed, and to be noticed is to be carried far, far from home, running with the storm until your breath becomes wind. So the wisdom of cottage and hearth is simple. Lower your gaze, step aside, let them pass. There are counsels for safety, handed down like recipes. Keep a bit of iron in your pocket, a nail or a buckle. Turn your cloak inside out if you must walk under a troubled sky. Carry a crust of bread for the hounds. If they pause at your door, offer it with a blessing, and do not speak their master's name. If the horns draw near while you travel, lie still among the roots of an oak, face to earth, until the hoofbeats fade into the clouds. One tale tells of a woodcutter returning late by the old track that skirts the marsh. He felt the weather change, the air sharpening, the birds falling silent, and then he heard it. A long, cold note, like a silver thread pulled through night. Another answered, nearer. The woodcutter tucked his hat low and stepped off the path, kneeling in the fern's dark cradle.
He turned his coat lining out and pressed a penny of iron beneath his tongue, remembering his grandmother's advice.
They came like weather itself. First the hounds, racing in a line of quicksilver, paws never touching mud. After them, riders in mail that shone like wet slate, faces veiled, cloaks flowing behind like storm banners. One horse snorted steam that curled like script. Another tossed its head as though shaking snow from a bough. None looked left or right. None saw the man curled close to the earth, hands over his eyes. When the last horn called, the fern tips trembled, then stilled. The woodcutter lifted his head to an ordinary silence and the careful drip of thawing branches. Not all versions are fearful. Some say the hunt sometimes chases injustice out of a valley. In one parish, a tale is told of a lord who taxed winter as if it were harvest. That night the riders coursed the ridge, and by morning the lord changed his mind, claiming a dream had taught him mercy. In another place, a midwife lost her way in sleet, and was found at dawn sleeping unharmed beneath a hedge, a circle of dry ground around her, as if hooves had kept the storm at bay. Names drift like leaves across the map. Wild Jagd in the German woods, Oscarea in Norway, Hern's retinue in Windsor's great forest, Dando's dogs on Cornish moorland, where gorse grows gold as candlelight. In every tongue the story hums with the same note. The world is wider than our lanes and hedges, and sometimes the old roads in the sky are trod again. Scholars with warm rooms and tall candles will say the hunt is only a braid of natural things. Migrating birds calling in the dark, foxes barking, wind funneling through bare branches like trumpets, the thunder of distant hooves from a noble's winter chase. Others hear beneath those sounds an older music, midwinter rites, the turning of the year, the restless march of the unseen, folded into Christian winters and pagan memories, each century adding its own verse. So the customs persist. Lay a broom across the threshold, so what rides cannot cross uninvited. Ring a handbell once, gently, to mark your house as a place of peace. Keep rosemary or rowan by the door. Offer a share of your loaf at the crossroads, and walk on without watching where the crumbs go. Above all, if the wind's cry echoes like horns, step aside from pride and hurry. Let the storm have the road. And if, on some late hour, the sky runs like a river, and you feel your heart quicken to a rhythm you cannot name, remember the woodcutter and the fern. The hunt is not for you, nor you for it. Bow your head, whisper a blessing for riders and hounds alike, and trust the night to carry them past. By morning the hedges will glitter with frost, and the fields lie quiet, stitched with the tracks of ordinary deer. Whether omen or only weather, the wild hunt leaves no footprints you can follow, only a story, a hush, and the comfort of your own warm door.
The Pied Piper of Hamelin. Long ago, in the town of Hamelin in northern Germany, there was a terrible problem. The year was said to be 1284, and the town had grown rich from trade, its streets bustling with merchants and families. But along with its prosperity came an infestation. Rats, more numerous than anyone could count. They swarmed through the houses, gnawed through grain sacks, and spoiled the food. They ran across rooftops and scurried through the cellars. No matter how many traps were set, the rats always returned, hungrier than before. The people of Hamelin were desperate. They begged their mayor and town council to find a solution, for the rats threatened their very survival. Then, one day, a stranger appeared. He was tall and thin, dressed in a coat of many bright colours, almost like the shifting feathers of a bird. He carried with him a small pipe, and when he spoke, his voice was smooth and confident. "I can rid your town of rats," he told the council, "but my services are not free. You must pay me handsomely for the task." The mayor and council agreed at once. Anything was worth saving the town from its plague of vermin. The stranger smiled, placed the pipe to his lips, and began to play. The melody was strange, lilting and enchanting. As the notes carried through the streets, the rats stirred. From every corner of Hamelin they came, out of houses, down from attics, from beneath the cobblestones, and through the riverbanks. Thousands upon thousands of rats poured forth, their tiny eyes glinting, their whiskers twitching. Drawn by the music, they followed the piper. He led them through the streets, out beyond the town walls, and down to the river Weser. There he played his song one final time. The rats rushed into the water, plunged beneath the current, and drowned. At last Hamelin was free. The townsfolk cheered, rejoicing at their deliverance. But when the piper returned to the council to claim his payment, the mayor grew cold. "Surely," the mayor said, "you ask too much. The rats are gone, but you did not toil or sweat. You merely played a tune. We will give you half of what was promised, and not a coin more." The piper's eyes darkened. "You have broken your word," he said quietly, "and you will regret it." With that, he turned and left the town.
The next morning, as the bells of Hamelin rang for church, the piper returned. This time he played a different tune. The melody was light, playful, and sweet, yet it carried a strange power. And instead of rats, it was the children of Hamelin who stirred. One by one they came running, boys and girls, their faces bright, their eyes fixed on the piper. They laughed and danced as they followed him, as if caught in a joyful dream. The parents looked on in horror, realizing too late what was happening. They cried out, but their children did not hear. The piper led them through the streets, out the town gates, and toward the mountains beyond. Some say he led them into a cave that closed behind them, sealing them away forever. Others say he crossed the mountains into a new land, and that the children founded a settlement far away. Whatever the truth, the children of Hamelin were never seen again. Only 3 remained behind. One was lame and could not keep pace. One was deaf and had not heard the music. The third was blind and had not seen where the others had gone. From them the town learned what had happened. Grief fell heavy upon Hamelin. The people mourned their lost children, and the town was never the same again. For centuries afterward, the story was told as a warning. Keep your promises, for broken oaths bring bitter consequences. But beyond the moral, the tale holds mystery. Some historians believe the children may have been victims of disease, or perhaps left in a mass migration to settle new lands in Eastern Europe. Others see it as pure allegory, a story crafted to explain a tragedy long forgotten. Yet the image endures. A brightly dressed piper leading the children of Hamelin away with a tune no one else could resist. A song that carried them into legend. Even today, in the town of Hamelin, there are stained glass windows, carvings, and manuscripts that preserve the memory of the children who vanished and the mysterious figure who took them. And so the tale of the Pied Piper remains, haunting, beautiful, and sad. A story of betrayal, of loss, and of music with the power to charm not only rats, but human hearts as well. Reynard the Fox.
Not all medieval tales were filled with fear or tragedy. Some were told for laughter, for wit, and for sly lessons about the world. And among these none was more beloved than the tales of Reynard the Fox. Reynard was no ordinary fox. He was cunning, clever, and quick-tongued. In the stories told across France, Germany, and the Low Countries, he was not simply an animal, but a character who lived among a whole kingdom of talking beasts. There was Noble the lion, who ruled as king; Bruin the bear, proud and blundering; Isengrim the wolf, fierce but foolish; and many others. Where Reynard went, mischief always followed. In one story, the animals gathered to complain about Reynard's wicked deeds. He had tricked Bruin the bear into sticking his head into a log smeared with honey, leaving the bear trapped while peasants beat him with sticks. He had stolen food, deceived neighbors, and played cruel jokes on all who crossed his path. At last, the Lion King declared that Reynard must stand trial. Messengers were sent to bring him before the court. But Reynard, sly as ever, was not afraid. He appeared, bowed low, and began to speak with honeyed words. He admitted nothing. Instead, he told clever tales that cast suspicion on others. He flattered the king, accused his enemies of far worse crimes, and wove lies so skillfully that even the wise owl could not untangle them. By the end of his speech, Reynard had turned the court's anger away from himself. In some versions of the tales, he was even rewarded, praised for his wit, and set free, while his accusers went away shamed.
The charm of Reynard's stories was not just in his tricks, but in the way they poked fun at real life. For the peasants who listened, the lion's court felt a lot like the courts of human kings, full of corruption, flattery, and empty justice. Reynard the Fox became a symbol of the little man outwitting the powerful, a trickster who survived not with strength, but with cleverness. But Reynard was no hero. His schemes could be cruel. In some tales, he tricked Isengrim the wolf into humiliations that left the poor wolf battered and broken. In others, he deceived simple folk or led his fellow animals into danger while saving himself. Reynard always looked out for Reynard. And yet people could not stop telling his tales. Around winter fires, minstrels recited them in verse, while children laughed at Reynard's tricks. Manuscripts were copied with colourful pictures of the fox, outsmarting bear, wolf, or cock. His stories spread so widely that by the late Middle Ages, Reynard had become one of Europe's most famous trickster figures. So much so that the French word for fox, renard, comes directly from his name. The stories of Reynard carried more than laughter. They reminded listeners that the world was not always fair, and that wit and cleverness could succeed where strength and honesty might fail. They were tales of survival for a time when peasants often felt powerless in the face of lords, priests, and kings. And so Reynard endured. Even today, his sly face appears in fables, in literature, and in art. The fox with the silver tongue, who could talk his way out of any snare, remains a symbol of trickery, wit, and the double-edged power of words. When you imagine Reynard, picture a sleek red fox, his eyes glinting with mischief. He bows politely to the lion, tail flicking, every word he speaks as smooth as silk. Around him his enemies fume and rage, but Reynard only smiles. For he knows, as always, that with cleverness and charm he will slip free once more, leaving chaos in his wake. A trickster, a deceiver, and a survivor, Reynard the Fox still prowls the edges of our imagination, sly and laughing in the shadows. The Wandering Jew.
Among the many tales told in the Middle Ages, few were as haunting as the story of the Wandering Jew. It was a tale not of beasts or lost children, but of one man cursed to walk the earth for eternity. The story begins, as many medieval legends did, in the time of Christ. As the tale was told, when Jesus carried his cross to Golgotha, he passed by the doorway of a man's house. Some said this man was a cobbler, others that he was a gatekeeper or a servant. Whatever his station, he looked upon Christ, weary and burdened, and he mocked him. "Move along faster," the man is said to have jeered. "Do not rest here." Christ, though near to death, turned his gaze upon him, and in that gaze was both sorrow and judgment. He spoke words that would shape the man's fate forever. "You shall walk the earth until I return." And so, the story claimed, the man was cursed, unable to die, unable to rest, doomed to wander from land to land until the end of days. In the centuries that followed, whispers of the Wandering Jew spread across Europe. Some claimed to have seen him passing through their towns, a tall, weary man with hair and beard long and unkempt, eyes filled with endless sadness. He never stayed in one place for long, always moving, always searching, but never finding peace. Legends grew with each retelling. In England, they called him Joseph Cartaphilus. In Germany, he was Ahasuerus. In other places, he bore different names, but always the same fate. Some said he travelled as a pilgrim, forever knocking on doors, seeking food and shelter, but gone again by dawn. Others swore he possessed secret knowledge, gathered in his endless travels, and that he sometimes spoke of distant lands or strange prophecies. For medieval listeners, the Wandering Jew was more than just a man. He was a living reminder of Christ's suffering, a symbol of restlessness and the burden of guilt. Priests used the tale as a warning, an example of what happened when one showed cruelty instead of compassion. To mock the suffering of the innocent was to invite a curse that no earthly power could break.
But the legend also carried fascination. To some, the Wandering Jew seemed almost enviable. Imagine walking the earth across centuries, seeing kingdoms rise and fall, watching new inventions change the world, hearing languages evolve, and standing witness to all of history. What secrets might such a traveller carry? What wisdom could be gleaned from a man who had walked the roads of the world since the time of Christ? As time went on, the tale spread beyond sermons and manuscripts. Minstrels sang of the wanderer. Travellers told of meeting him on lonely roads, a stranger whose eyes seemed to hold the weight of centuries. Some even believed he appeared during great calamities, wars, plagues, or famines, his presence a sign of divine judgment. Yet the story was never told in exactly the same way. Sometimes he was a figure of pity, forever seeking forgiveness he could not find. Sometimes he was a dark omen, an immortal cursed to bring misfortune wherever he went. And sometimes he was almost heroic, a lonely guardian wandering the earth until the world's end. Even now, the legend lingers. From medieval manuscripts to modern novels, the Wandering Jew continues to walk the roads of imagination, as timeless as the curse he bore. Whether as a warning, a symbol, or a mystery, his story reminds us of the deep power of compassion and of the loneliness that comes when it is denied. So, if ever you hear footsteps on a quiet road at night and see a tired stranger pass by, cloak wrapped tight, eyes heavy with sorrow, perhaps it is only a traveller. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it is the Wandering Jew, still walking, still waiting, as he has for nearly 2,000 years.